Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is a renowned artist, having done work for authors and companies like Wizards of the Coast, D&D, Magic the Gathering, World of Warcraft, and many, many, many more. Please welcome the wonderful Todd Lockwood to Epic Realms. How are you doing, Todd?
I am well. I'm well. Pleased to be here.
You have just a plethora of works of art, and there are so many people in the gaming community, whether it's video games or reading novels or D&D, that see your art and don't realize it half the time. Um, what how does that feel to you to be like seeing stuff and people are like, oh, you did this and you did this and you did that? You're all over the place.
Well, it's strange. Yeah, I've had my toes in a lot of pies. Wait, I've dabbled my toe. No, not pies, pools.
Pools,
You
pools,
don't have my
pools.
toes in your pie.
Not my pie. Yeah, no, no.
No. But yeah, that job that I took with TSR, working for D&D, turned out to be an amazing springboard for the whole rest of my career. It got me employed, building a portfolio, refining my craft, creating an audience for my flavor of work. And then when Wizard of the Coast bought TSR, and we got to revamp the look of Dungeons and Dragons for the third edition release. Um, I mean, that was a dream gig.
Yeah,
I got paid to do that. It's amazing. It
yeah.
was amazing to me then, and it's still amazing to me. I've been extremely fortunate.
I feel like at the time when third edition came out and you were looking just the dragons alone, that's a look now that kind of is the standard bearer for what each of the different types of dragons looks like now and has continued to look like in all the editions in some way, shape, or form. So I think it's
Yeah, for
really cool that
25
the
years.
look differentiates with all the colors and it's very specific. And you see that still in fifth edition and in even in other games. So I think it's a really, really cool thing. And you were kind of like the standard bearer who did that. So
Yeah, and I always have to give props to Sam Wood, who also worked on the Dragons with me and did some of the illustrations and didn't get credit for them in the monster manual. But if you're looking at the third edition Dragons, it's Sam Wood and I.
okay.
Um, we just had very similar tastes in what the aesthetics of fantasy creatures should be, not just dragons, but everything, but especially dragons.
Yeah.
Sam went to Harvard to study biology and art. So he knew his anatomy,
Yeah.
and I've always been an anatomy geek. I mean, we studied human anatomy in art school, but I have books on animal anatomy too, and it colored my choices as our choices, both of us. We were in agreement on how a dragon should be put together biologically based on its evolution,
Yeah.
if you will.
That's awesome. Let's rewind a
So
little bit. Um, Growing up as a kid, I know you started art super early. You've said it on other shows and stuff. Was your household like an art type household, or were you just kind of the one that just did the art and everyone else just kind of was good job?
no, I did it the most, but my parents were both artistic. There was a lot of music in the house too, music and art. I was too shy to chase the music. My brother and sisters were in the show choirs at school, but I didn't want to be singing and dancing on a stage. Um, no, when I came home from school, I just dropped my homework on the floor and got some paper out and started drawing. I was making stories in my head. I made my own comic books. So in my mind, I was drawing a TV show or a movie.
Yeah.
So really, I was storyboarding and also turning people and shapes and things in space from panel to panel. It was a great education, but that's how anybody gets good at anything. You do it and you do it and you do it and you do it.
Yeah. Did you grow up on comic books? And if so, what were some of your favorite comic books?
Really, I didn't. I was not a comic book kid. I thought superheroes were kind of dumb with
Okay.
their spandex. Thor, what's a Norse god doing in a superhero comic book? But until the movies came out, I didn't appreciate them really at all.
Yeah.
Although I did have the Spider-Man issue that introduced Dr. Octopus, and I don't know what happened to it, but I really liked that. And then, strangely, it's my favorite of the Spider-Man movies is the one with Alfred Molina as Doc Ock.
Yeah.
Such such a great story, the way they put him in there and, told his art. Um, but the one comic, if I collected any comic, the one I collected is kind of obscure and few people have heard of it, and that was Magnus Robot Fighter.
I haven't heard of that, so no.
A
What was
few
it about
people
that that
have.
stood out to you that you were like drawn to?
Well, it was good art. It was science fiction more than superheroes, although, stupidly, he was just a super strong guy that defeated robots by beating them up with his fist. So in that regard, it was pretty dumb. But that, for whatever reason, that was one of the ones I was drawn to. That's how I know that when you kill a robot, it goes squee.
Did you said you got home, you drop off your bags, and you just like start doing art? Did art get in the way of school for you at all? Was it some kinds of hindrance where you're like doing
No,
stuff instead of other
actually,
things?
no, I was a bright kid, I guess. I was a straight A student, but I could turn a B science paper into an A plus paper by adding illustrations. I did that with an essay on anthropology, and I went to the encyclopedia and found pictures of Neanderthal and so on. And we had dictionaries in our house, first of all, and I would open them up to get the reference I needed for an assignment, and then I'd just keep reading. It's the perfect thing to put in a house for a curious kid.
Yeah.
Uh, Liken it to Wikipedia, maybe, where there's no distraction to go off and play video games or Facebook or Twitter or
Yeah.
TikTok or whatever.
TikTok.
But I wandered off the question. Um, no, I was a good student. So, but I wasn't above using art to boost a grade here and there. And
Yeah.
honestly, I might not have graduated high school if my last year of school, my teacher had been in class any more often than I was. She just already knew that I was a good artist and she just gave me A's. And I did do the assignments, but I didn't do them in class. I did them like after school or at home, whatever. And she was seldom in class because she was kind of a hippie.
Okay.
But
So you
Mrs.
lucked out
Harden,
with that.
Mrs. Hartenstein, I wish I'd have kept in touch with her after high school because she ran into my brother once and told him that I was the one student out of all her art students that she wanted to keep track of. And I didn't find her in time. She passed away before I could get back in touch with her, which makes me sad to this day because she was a great influence,
Yeah.
one of my first best teachers.
Well, there's a note of encouragement for anybody who's been in school and has a teacher that they really like to try and stay in touch and not
Absolutely.
lose that contact.
Yeah, she's the only teacher that I would have, I think.
Did the other
But
teachers encourage the art, or were they like, "Hey, now, other than when you draw anthropology stuff"?
non-cipher for most of them.
Okay, okay,
Sixth grade was when I did that anthropology report, and that was Mrs. Oh God, what was her name? I had such a crush on her. In hindsight, knowing that her husband worked with my dad, but she was also a sixth grade teacher. She was probably 20 something,
okay.
and however old you are in sixth grade, 11,
Right, right.
11. But
Young
I had a crush.
impressionable kids always.
Yeah, yeah. So I would draw things just knowing that she would like them.
When you moved on, you went to college. Did you have a hard time choosing where you were going to go and what you were going to do, or were you like, I'm going to do art and this is where I want to go, or am I going to do art and
Well,
I don't know
I
where I'm
knew
going to
where
go?
I wanted. I knew where I wanted to go. I wanted to go to the Colorado Institute of Art because it was close by in Denver.
Okay.
Um, and in fact, for the longest time, I enjoyed saying that I got my art education at the CIA, Colorado Institute of Art. And then they changed it to the Art Institute of Colorado and ruined the joke. But and now they're out of business. The art institutes are all gone um, for predatory loaning practices or something.
Oh
They
no.
got sued out of existence. But anyway, I did think that if I was going to have a career in art, I should get some business schooling first.
Okay.
And so I enrolled in classes at the Rocky Mountain School of Business. And 2 weeks in, I was thinking, I do not belong here. These are not my people.
Yeah.
I don't like any of these prefab hairdos, and I don't know. I was just feeling like, what have I done? I've signed up for 2 years of this.
Yeah.
And then within the next few days, I showed up for class and the doors were locked and there was a sign saying that the school was out of business.
Wow.
So I got a partial refund and I went straight to art school.
Nice. Was there anything that you learned going to college that you still use today that you always reference or think of or anything like that?
Oh, I had my foundation in all the basic principles at CIA. Gosh, I wish I could remember all the names. There was a gal who taught the first or second order design class who really had some unique assignments. Um, and those were interesting because, it introduced me to new tools like circle cutters. We did a lot of compositions where we explored design concept using just black circles on a white background.
Okay.
But according to how you cut them out, overlap them, or sectioned them, you create different, um, you'd present different concepts like gradation or grouping or different kinds of movement and it was really illuminating because it was one of the first times that I was being taught the basic principles of composition without thinking about what these objects are.
Yeah.
So they're purely abstract shapes, but they can still make an interesting picture. And that's a really important part of any composition, of any picture. You got to know how to use things like gradation and contrast of size and value and direction and angle and light and dark. I mean, all of that comes together um, in a two-dimensional surface that you want to grab people as immediately as possible and keep their eye moving within the picture. Composition class, what was that teacher's name? He's the one who explained that we're artists and we grew up needing those warm fuzzies that we got from the praise for our art to offset the cold pricklies that life threw at us as sensitive people. And I've always remembered him for that. He taught me a thing or two about reflected light. So yeah, it was a great place to be and at the right time to be there. It was $200 a semester, but we're talking
That's not bad. Yeah, I
1979.
was gonna say that's not bad these days. I'll take it.
No, it went up to 300 and everybody was shocked.
I just know everybody that goes that is in an industry that they really love and went to school, went to college for that industry. There's always these handful of little nuggets that they take away that most people don't even realize, the teachers don't even realize that lives with them forever. And I had to ask you that question because as an artist and with all the stuff you've done, I knew that there had to be some takeaways that you like look back fondly on and go, yeah, that was some great information to have. So
Absolutely. There was a lesson or two that still pops into my mind with like reflected light. I always think of Mr. His name was, and it was just a silhouette of a moose that I painted from a photograph. And I just painted him kind of silhouette with light in the background and the rim light around the body. And it
mhm.
looked pretty cool. And he said, I know it's not in the photograph, but if you put just a little bit of light reflecting off the foreground onto this shaded side that's tortoise of this moose, he'll look more round and more real. So I did it, and damn, he was right.
Yeah.
It's the simplest thing. And so what you know about a thing can improve your photo reference, although you should have good reference, but you shouldn't be so dependent upon it that you don't know how to fix what it's missing.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
That's great. Did the college help you getting into any businesses, getting work, getting jobs? Because I know some schools, some colleges, especially back in that era, they'd help you get your foot in the door in certain industries. Was that a thing for you?
Well, they did after graduation, there was a open portfolio night for local employers to come in. And I got hired by the Rocky Mountain News to be their on-staff artist, and then I got talked out of that by Richard D'Oliveira. It was the art department then, and then it became the D'Oliveira Creative later. But he explained what a dead end that Rocky Mountain News job would have been. And of course, his needs were self-serving, but ultimately, I think he was right. I had done some freelance work for the news, and that was fun, and I learned from that. But I'm not sure it's something I could have done as a career.
Yeah.
For one things, I'd have been working weekends and late in the night to get illustrations for their Sunday tabloid, stuff like that. I'm happy with the route I took because I was working for a design shop that needed guys who could do everything, illustration and logo design and typesetting and all everything you had to do to work in that industry 45 years ago. So almost 45.
I remember
Jesus
somebody mentioning to me earlier this week because I told him you were going to be on the show. And you're like, you definitely got to ask him about beer cans.
Christ.
And so I looked and I was like, oh, and I saw a quote about something about you saying if I never see another beer can in my life, it'd be too soon, something along those lines. So I have to ask you, what's with beer cans and why the
Well,
where does this lie in your career?
my 14-year career in advertising was in Denver, which didn't have a lot of big clients, but Coors Beer was probably the biggest fish in that little pond. And I was doing advertising illustration, and because in the 80s, everybody wanted airbrush. That was the thing that everybody wanted. Then I had to do airbrush to get work. And that led to painting billboards and other advertising for the Silver Bullet, Coors Light. Now, in the 80s and early 90s, if you were painting something like a beer can and you wanted to look airbrushy and slick and have it in perspective and super cool, you had to hand letter the labels. You had to paint every dewdrop by hand, and it was tedious, tedious work. It paid okay. It was one of the better paychecks that I would get back in the day. But yeah, like if you picture the Coors label on the can, well, it gets bent around the can. You can't
Yeah,
just slap it down. Like now you could work it out in Photoshop, and Photoshop couldn't do that even in the early 90s
right.
when I first looking at it. So I would have to draw it in perspective, probably grid it off to get all the movements right, draw a grid and then draw a grid on my two-dimensional can, draw the label, oversize, run it into Denver, get it shot down and turned into a PMT, which is a photomechanical transfer. So it's like ink on the back of a vinyl sheet. You rub it down and it sticks to your board.
Okay.
And you peel the sheet off and you've got color there. And then spray a highlight over it, add the shadows, and then paint dewdrops all over everything. And there'd be 1,000 dewdrops in every one of these cans, a
Right.
little formula. And so if I've painted anything more than scales on dragons, it's probably dewdrops on beer cans.
But you probably prefer to do more scales on dragons, right?
More scales on dragons, yeah. And then around 1985, I got some work for a magazine called Satellite Orbit, which was sort of a TV guide for people who had those 8 or 10 inch satellite dishes in their yard, um, guiding them to where to steal the feed from HBO and other signals like that.
Yeah.
Uh, but they just turned me loose, and you can paint anything you want as long as there's a satellite dish in it. And so I did a series of paintings for them, which ended up in um, Communication Arts Illustration Annual, which was a big deal and a big feather in my cap. But after that, if anybody on the planet needed a satellite dish painted, they called me. And it wasn't creative. It wasn't paint what you want. It wasn't like the one cover that I liked the most was a field of satellite dish flowers, the bright red, being tended by a robot honeybee satellite.
Okay.
So it was metaphorical and fun. See, that was fun, but a family of people sitting and watching TV with the ghost of a satellite dish behind them, that's not fun.
Yeah.
That's just
Creative, those
that,
people in the offices are coming up with their ideas for the artists, right?
uh-huh, uh-huh. Yeah, that may be when I started plotting my escape from advertising, although
Yeah.
there were other instances.
Well, you had talked
Um,
about dragon scales. Were you a D&D player before
Oh
you were
yeah.
in college, or was that after? Kind of tell us about
No,
your
no,
history with D&D.
before. No. I started playing in 77
Okay.
with the little white box of pamphlets. Not the very first edition, but one of the very first
Yeah.
editions. Before D&D, before AD&D,
Yeah.
by far. It was when it was D&D. And we had a high school buddy 1 year ahead who had gone to Germany with the military, probably the army, I guess. And he picked up D&D there. And it's, to this day, D&D is big in the military. It's a great way to
Kill
pass
time.
time.
Yeah.
And
And separate yourself from whatever is
the
going on.
world,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And he came back and turned us all onto it. And so we played a lot of D&D. And that, that was a time when we would go every weekend. We would start at 11 a.m. or noon on Saturday and go through the night and into Sunday and knock off about 10 p.m. Sunday. I mean, a good 30 hours of
Yeah.
straight D&D. I mean, those were the days.
Right. Right. Looking
Little
back.
by little, it became one day, and then every other weekend, and then once a month, and and then people get jobs and they move, or they have children, or they get married, and
Yeah. Do you
just
still play?
everything. No, I haven't really played regularly with a group since I left Colorado,
Okay.
left my group behind, and went to take the job at TSR or making D&D. So I was kind of getting my fix every day. I didn't really need that
Yeah.
release. There were some kind of moments working there, like discovering that in the official D&D universes, Orcus and Loth are still alive on their own planes. But we killed them on their own planes. We went to their planes and killed them. They're dead forever.
Right. Right.
It was disappointing and maddening, but also illuminating because it really reinforced for me how realistic those games are when you're playing them.
Yeah.
They're real worlds. You immerse yourself and you have camaraderie and feelings for your characters and your friends' characters.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. Totally immersive.
And trying to separate like what the canon is from what your story is, because your story is yours, not anyone else's. It's special, you know.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah.
So
We
if you,
killed those two gods,
yeah.
dag Nick.
They're supposed to be dead. I don't care what you say, TSR.
But we were very powerful. We
Uh,
played to the teens and 20s in level, and the other DM who hosted, we would go back and forth, Bill Lennox and I. He was very good at challenging me, and I was good at challenging him, making him more creative, and him making me more ruthless maybe, but also more clever. We were very honest about our games, it wasn't but anyway, we they weren't giveaways, all those levels. We had been playing for a decade or more with the same characters.
yeah.
So I had to go somewhere, which
Yeah.
meant and that's part of the reason we played less less often. It was more work to prepare for 6 or 8 upper teen level
Right.
characters.
Being able to make it a challenge and not have them just stomp through it or have them all just die instantly.
Right, right. Yeah, you learn to be nimble as a DM. You don't want it too easy, you don't want it too hard. Doesn't mean you don't kill them every time, or not every time, from time to
From
time.
time to time. Yeah.
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 total party kills, but always a way out because there was somebody, like I killed all my characters in one game, but there was one of them who had acquired Constitution of 20, and so he regenerated. He could regenerate from
Yeah,
death
back then, yeah.
back in that day. Yeah. And so he woke up in a pile of logs with his dead comrades just as the lackeys were pouring the oil on to burn the corpses and scared the crap out of them. And, they didn't get their stuff back, but they were alive.
Yeah. I always ask this question to people who play D&D
All
or
right.
have played D&D. On this show, the ongoing question is, do you prefer to be a player or do you prefer to be a GM or DM
Yes.
in the case of D&D?
No, both. I like both.
Okay.
I like playing because I like thinking as a character. See, this all goes into my love of fiction. I was always a storyteller. When I was learning to draw, is because I was telling stories, and that's my favorite thing about art. I was drawing and writing at the same time, but it was art that paid the bills first.
Yeah.
So I became an artist. But that muse never died. I just kept her fed with scraps from the D&D table.
Yeah.
But I also like DMing because then you're building a world and thinking of motivations for non-player characters. It all just feeds into um, telling a good story.
Yeah. Where did the shift happen when you were like, I'm gonna stop painting satellite dishes and I'm gonna start, trying to do more fantasy type art?
Well, there was a I had agents in New York who shall go nameless, but their initials were Bernstein and Andreuli. I don't know if they're still around or not, but Sam Bernstein and Tony Andreuli, they were a couple of caricatures. Um, the son of Sam Bernstein, might still be around, um, heir apparent to the business, but he put me through some tests just by being kind of a cold bastard. And I hope he's still alive because I don't want to speak ill of the dead. But um, yeah, I once put myself in the hospital trying to finish a painting for him while working with the flu.
Oh wow.
And I called him the day that I got home, or he called me, and I thought, oh, he said, this is Sam. And I thought, oh, here's Sam. You might want to bleep out the names. I don't know. I guess it's already live out there. Anyway, I thought, oh, he's calling to make sure I'm okay. And he said, you son of a bitch, you made my painting a day late. And that was the first day I started thinking about, I got to do something else.
Yeah.
Because I was tired of the Friday afternoon call with a Monday morning deadline and a day before FedEx operated on weekends
Yeah.
and nothing was digital and you couldn't just, you know, you couldn't transmit over distance better than a fax machine in those days.
Right.
Many a day I packaged up a painting at the last minute on Monday and drove it to the airport so it could get on a FedEx plane to New York and be there Tuesday. Because there was no way I could get it to them Monday unless I could
Right.
paint it within the next 2 hours after their call. And it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. And then it was the son of Sam again on a painting for AT&T. It was a painting of a hotel building. And the first specs that I got from the art director said paint it this way. And so I drew that up. And then they had a change of plan and they wanted to revision the ad completely. And I said to Sam, well, then we have to charge for the design time for the drawing because this is on them. They changed it, not me. And he said, yeah, you're right. I'll make sure that gets taken care of. And then when the check finally came, and they always came late because anyway,
Because they can be
um,
late, but you can't.
yeah, it didn't include that additional fee. And I called Sam and said, that fee's not on here. And he said, oh, you're right. Okay, I'll take care of it. Another month passed. Sam, um, did you talk to them about that fee? He said, oh, yeah, yeah. Don't know what happened. I'll get back to it or I'll ping them again. I'm on it. And at that point, I went to the paperwork for the job, found the client's name, found the design director's phone number, and I called her and said, this is what happened. You owe me this much money. And she said, oh, you're right. We'll take care of that. And within a week, I had a check. So I called Sam and I said, Sam, the money came. And he said, I told you I'd take care of it. And that was the day I knew I had to escape advertising.
Yeah.
I was being lied to. I was being used. I didn't own anything I did. None of it was anything anybody would ever want to look at twice. It was on a billboard that you hated as it was blocking out the scenery
Right.
driving down a Colorado highway. Um, yeah, that's when I knew I had to get out.
So then you
I
started
did.
looking for other kind of work.
Better class of work. Yeah, it was really actually Bernstein Andrews. There was one girl there. Her name was Francine. Um, can't remember her last name off the top of my head, but she was a real sweetheart. And she seemed to get all the publishing work that none of the other reps there wanted. They wanted advertising.
Yeah.
They didn't want, book covers and stuff that didn't pay so well in their view. Advertising was the big tickets. I did a sample of a sci-fi cover and sent it to them, and I got a call from Sam himself, Bernstein. I'll never forget it. He said, "That's not the kind of work you want to do, my boy. Nobody wants that work. Yachts and golfers. That's where the money is. Yachts and golfers." I didn't want to paint yachts and golfers. I wanted to paint dragons and spaceships and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Love the
yeah,
accent, by the way. Love the accent on that
yeah.
one.
Well, he was New York all the way.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess I get some credit for spurring me to take initiative for myself. I was terribly, terribly shy. I hated the idea of going door to door with a portfolio. So agents seemed like a good thing, and I did that throughout the advertising years. But they started out taking 15% in Denver, and then they went up to 20. And meanwhile, New York was taking 20%, and then they went up to 25. And when they were both threatening to go up 5% again, it's like, why am I doing this? I'm doing all the work. I
Right.
sit by a phone. Sometimes I'm calling the client and reminding them that I haven't been paid. And then they take credit for that too.
Wow.
So, be your own representative. That's I mean, there's probably artists that would just disagree with me. Greg Manchis has had a long running relationship with his agent. Can't think of his name, but for decades,
Yeah.
and he's done right by him. But
So how'd you get into doing D&D? How did they get a hold of you? Did you get a hold of them?
well, I managed to get a couple of covers from my agents in New York for Asimov magazine
Okay.
because the artist that was supposed to do them, Chris Moore, had an eye infection and he couldn't work. Um, so I got these two covers, and the art director was very happy and started giving me more covers. And I said, how can I get more of this work that, in parentheses, I didn't say it to her, but pays better than Asimov's magazine because that was cheap. That's why Bernstein really didn't want that work.
Yeah.
Give that stuff to Francine. She knows somebody who'll do it. And I asked her, how can I get more work like this? And she said, try hanging a show at a science fiction fantasy convention. I said, what's that?
Yeah.
I had no, I had no idea. This was in 93 or very early 94, maybe, but the Worldcon in Winnipeg in 1994 was my first convention. And that was a game changer. Within 2 years, I was working for TSR.
That's
Um, I
awesome.
had, I had some personal work. I did some work for that show. If you've seen my drawing, Cerberus, it's on my website in the gallery under Other Visions. I hung the original of that there, and another pencil drawing I'd done, Zeke, may also be in that same gallery. But Michael Whalen took note of them and stopped me in a hall to tell me how much he liked them. That was like a kill me now moment because
Yeah.
Michael Whalen was my idol. I wanted to be like Mike.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And also from that convention, I got contacted by Carl Nam at Realms of Fantasy magazine, and they didn't have budgets to speak of,
Right.
but they gave me free rein to illustrate short stories by noted authors like Tanith Lee and others. And so my early portfolio was built just doing the cheapest work that I could squeeze out time to do.
Yeah.
And at that time, I'd become really efficient at not painting an airbrush. Um, and I was able to do work that I'm proud of, and some of it still hangs in my home because my wife wouldn't let me get rid of it. But I, I made friends there who knew people who I made a friend, Dave. Dave, what's your last name? Oh my God. God, the years get behind you.
right? I'm surprised you're
Michelle's big.
remembering first names. I can't remember first names of people I know from 2 weeks ago. So you're way ahead of the game for me.
Well, the stuff you learned when you were younger sticks better than the stuff you learn when you're older. Um, Dave, anyway, he introduced me to one of the art directors at TSR, who just happened to be in Denver to visit his parents, and he stopped by the house and we talked, and I showed him my work. And next thing I know, two of the artists on staff at TSR have quit, and he calls me up and asks if I'm interested in applying for the vacancy.
Yeah.
And I said, let me think about that for a minute. Yes. And I did, and there's stories about that too. I flew out to see a friend in Minneapolis, and we drove down to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, which was where TSR was,
Yeah.
so that I could talk to the two guys who'd left and figure out, this is under the behind the scenes, and why they left, and so I could go into this with my eyes open. Um, I was still new at that whole looking out for yourself thing. I've been
Right.
relying on agents who were really taking advantage of me. Um, but if you put your mind to something, I don't know, you can overcome anything. I didn't get over horrifying shyness until I had to talk in front of a group of people at a science fiction fantasy convention.
Yeah.
That's really how I learned to get out of that. And it still strikes me sometime in a situation where I'll just be like, I don't fucking belong here. I don't know what to do in this situation. I start to freak out. Doesn't happen very often, but almost never anymore. But like the first time I won at Chesley at the 96 World Fantasy, if not 95, it was for Cerberus. We had to go up to a microphone and accept our award, and I said, thanks. And I ran
Yeah.
to my seat. It was
When you
bad.
started working for them, for whether it's D&D or anybody like that, were they coming to you and be like, okay, we want a cover art of, and we want this character and that and this, and we want
Well,
this
it
thing,
did
or is
get
it just like this is kind of the theme we want? Kind of what is kind of direction are they giving you for some of these?
okay. Well, the first things I did for TSR before they hired me, um, and this was right after my appendix blew up and I was kind of in recovery. Um, it's really strange how that event marked this point of demarcation between my old art life and my new art life. It's almost like my career died and was born again when my appendix ruptured. Maybe all that stress is bad for your appendix. Who knew?
Probably, yeah.
But he sent me some cards for a game TSR was trying to develop to kind of fight back against this new card game that was taking the world by storm. And those were kind of fun. But then another artist, similar to the situation with um, Asimov's, that artist, Chris Moore, British artist, science fiction covers. Uh, his eyes recovered and he continued working and is still working today, as far as I know. But that summer or spring rather, in 96, there was another artist freelancing covers for them that was late because um, they weren't sure what had happened, whether it was a stroke or a heart attack or a medication imbalance issue or something. But Larry Elmore had three covers he was supposed to do that he couldn't do, and they were late. And I got them. And the first of those was Vinus Solemnis, um, a guy running through the snow. And they did send me reference to the armor and give me a brief idea of what the story was about. But I basically got to have free reign with the composition and the drama of the scene, which was perfect.
Yeah.
And then the second one was The Wayward Knights. And I think that painting kind of kicked some doors down there at a time when artists were leaving and they needed somebody new because the perspective was dramatic and the
Yeah.
composition was spot on. And that's when my wife forbid me to sell. Um, and then the third was Fistandantalus. So those three covers were my first pieces of work for them, and they asked me to apply, and I applied. And so within 6 months of my appendix blowing up, I moved my family from Colorado to Illinois and Wisconsin to take this job at TSR.
Yeah.
Whirlwind between my first convention and taking that job. It still doesn't seem real looking back on it. And then within a year of that, um, TSR went bankrupt, Wizards of the Coast bought them and moved us to Washington State.
Yeah.
3 moves in 2 years was pretty crazy. Ask my wife.
How is it for you being a person who grew up with D&D to go, I'm doing the art for like official art for D&D? And
Uh,
has that feeling changed over the years?
no, pinch me work. I'm proud of the time there. I can't work with them anymore because they don't pay enough as a freelancer.
Yeah.
Uh, the D&D side doesn't. Maybe they've gotten better. I don't know, but I did my time. I made an impact. I made a good impact. The third edition stuff, and then various covers I did, and then the gig painting Bob Salvatore's covers
Yeah.
was another great run, and a bunch of magic cards. And I got to do stuff for um, Ted Williams and C.J. Cherry and a number of other fantasy and sci-fi authors. I mean, in the last few years, as photo bashing and now AI is starting to change things, I'm becoming a dinosaur in that field. But it's okay because I was able to leap from that precipice with wings fully gilded on or strapped on or whatever, and take a leap into some other things that I wanted to do. I wrote a novel, and that did very well. I'm working on the sequel now, which is only 8 years late, but it's still on its way.
Yeah.
Uh, and it did really well. And I'm proud of it. And I want to finish that project. It was meant to be a three book trilogy. It's called The Summer Dragon.
Yeah. The Evertide series, right?
First book of the
Yeah.
Evertide. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
How
so I'm
did
working
how
on.
did that come about? How did you go, I've been doing all this art and now I'm gonna write a novel?
Well, a number of things because I'd just been laid off by Hasbro,
Okay.
by Wizards of the Coast, and so I had more time on my hands than I had before. Like I didn't have to commute 2 ways in bad traffic any longer. I was working from home. And that was about the time, I almost hate to talk about it because politics is so upsetting, but that was about the time that Bush and Cheney were laying us into a war in Afghanistan um, over WMDs that didn't exist.
Yeah.
Ooh, boogie, boogie, scary stuff. And I was angry about it. And I thought, I started actually doing a daily um, email news digest because there were news outlets then, but you had to be online to see them. And most people I know didn't have time to do that at work. And
Right.
instead of commuting, I compiled these little newsletters of pertinent stories with a URL, pertinent paragraph or two, and let people look at them. And the list grew to like 350 people in no time at all because um, people wanted to hear perspectives other than what they were getting from the mainstream news. Who I remember on Good Morning America covered up Sheryl Crow's T-shirt because it said "No war for oil," and so they cropped in just on her head so that her T-shirt wouldn't be seen.
Yeah.
That kind of censorship was upsetting to me. So I thought, doing that every day was starting to wear me down.
Right.
I started off every day angry. I thought I have to turn this into something creative or I'm going to lose my mind.
Right. Yeah.
So I
Change it
thought I'll
to
do a
positive.
book of, yeah, I'll do a book about a war with dragons in it. And the working title was The Dragon War. And I'll write enough backstory to string the pictures together and make an art book about dragons at war. And when I started writing that backstory, that old muse was awakened and she was hungry and she wanted to tell a story. And I quickly realized that I had more to say than just a book full of pictures could say
Yeah.
rightly. So I started writing, and I'm not I'm not browbeating. I'm not shaking anybody by the lapels and saying this is how it is. It's a fictional story,
Yeah.
fictional characters and regimes, but um, the people became real to me, and it made writing it fun. Um,
Did people
and
you know from the industry, authors or anything like that, help you out?
yeah, a few, but most of it was reading the how-to books by a lot of those authors, and learning the craft of plotting a book and writing a book. I mean, I think I was sort of a natural storyteller, but maybe not so much a natural novelist. I can't write as fast as I can sketch,
Right.
and I can't edit or fine tune as fast as I can paint by a magnitude of like 1,000. So, um, I'm slow. Plus, having not done it since I was young and fearless, it wasn't a living for me and still isn't. But I can indulge it because I have other ways of making money now. I can sell prints and I can
Right.
kickstart an art book and stuff like that. And hopefully something pays off every now and then. It's like Rita works for a monthly paycheck. I work for windfalls anymore. It's like famine, 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 windfall.
Yeah.
And Rita is just like nibble, 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 nibble. She's ready to retire. It's a little scary in this day and age right now.
Talking
But
about the way politics are and stuff like that, it reminds me of something we were talking about a little bit earlier, before we started, because I had asked you about a piece of art you had done, and I was like, "Is this Stephen Colbert?
oh,
Is this Stephen Colbert? Because that looks like it's Stephen Colbert with like a red, white, and blue shield and a big flaming sword."
that was Stephen Colbert.
What?
That was for Blizzard Entertainment for a parody deck, and they named him the Cole Coal Bear Bear. But they wanted Stephen Colbert in like patriotic armor with a flaming sword of truthiness. And they connected me up to a secret website of, his people with publicity shots that I could have access to. And I picked a good one with the cocked eyebrow and gave him a fist holding a flaming sword of arrow. It's the arrows from the Great Seal. And submitted to them, and they were all very happy with it. But then one day I got an email from the art director saying, "You can't show that picture anywhere ever. If you do, you will probably get sued." I was like, "Wait, what? Why can't we show that?" He said, there was a conflict with Colbert's people. You can't do it. Their lawyers threatened to sue if we release the photo. But you had a contract with them. This was sanctioned." And he said, "Yeah, I know, but sometimes the big levels things can shift, and they don't have to shift much for little people to get squashed."
Yeah.
So I was disappointed, but that was that. And then one weekend I started getting emails from reporters and um, bloggers and people asking me about that painting and showing pictures of it, sharing that picture. Um, and sort of horrified, I spent a mad weekend telling them all that they were violating copyright and they had to remove the picture, but it was too late. The demons were out of the box,
Yeah.
as they say. And by Monday morning, the lawyers at Blizzard had decided that it was parody, and so it was protected free speech, and it was okay to show it after all. um, and it became one of my best-selling prints at the Comic Con for
Yeah.
the next 3 4 years, and at Dragon Con. The first year, I took a big pile of them, or what I thought was a big pile, like 40 of them, to uh, Comic Con, and they were sold out in the first half a day. It was astonishing. We called my son at home and said, print 50 more Colberts
Yeah.
overnight.
Ship them over overnight.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So,
awesome.
so that was fun, and I was happy to do it. I remember the art director, and I'd done some work for Blizzard prior to that, and I was kind of deciding there were too many cooks in that little kitchen, and I was kind of done with their kind of, I don't know. You remember that first video that was done digitally for the band? I'm not working. That ain't working.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Money for nothing.
Money for nothing. That level of animation. That's how I viewed their characters at the time, because that was the only reference I got was these screen grabs, basically, of their oversimplified characters.
Yeah.
And I have to ask the art director, what is this motif on the shoulder and chin supposed to be? And he would say, I don't know, just make the most sense of it that you can. So
They don't even know.
and I said, can't I have developmental art, concept art? And he says, well, there sometimes isn't concept art for some of these characters. They just get rendered out by the 3D guys. So, or something like that.
Yeah.
And anyway, I had decided that I just really didn't want to do that kind of work anymore. And he called me up, and I was thinking, oh God, it's Jeremy. I'm gonna have to let him down somehow. He said, I have a card I'd really love for you to do it. I'm thinking, how am I gonna phrase this so I don't piss him off? And he said, it's Stephen Colbert as a paladin. Do you want it? And I said, yes. I was not gonna let that one get away.
No, no, that's great. Let's shift gears a little bit. We talked a little bit about your novel that you were working on. You're working on a second one, you said,
Uh-huh.
hoping to get all three of them out there. But you've also got another one that you kickstarted earlier that's going to come out in October, but it's not necessarily a novel per se. So tell
It's
us a little bit about your 12 Days of Christmas book. And I know you've been working on this forever, and you're finally getting down to doing it.
more than half my life. Yeah. This is actually something I started when I was still doing advertising about 1990. Um, all my kids were little. My oldest was 7. Um, God, and my newborn is now the mother of my granddaughter. But this is 1990. A friend of mine asked me if I would go to a night class at the Colorado Institute of Art on children's book illustration, something he wanted to try. And I thought, I'll be a good friend. I'll go along. It might be fun. And who knows? I was looking for any way out of advertising at the time. I'd tried my hand at a comic book of my own. It didn't pan out. So that's a comics is a job for a guy with no kids, no wife, no mortgage, who can live in his parents' basement for a year and get something going. But we attended this class in children's book illustration, and I got this spark of an idea all at once. It just kind of leapt from my forehead, fully formed. And I don't know what inspired it. Perhaps a teacher said something about take an existing song and put a different spin on it or something like that. But I thought,
Okay.
here's this old Christmas carol, the 12 Days of Christmas,
Right.
which has always been kind of odd. And I had never seen a book of it that wasn't more than just on the first day, oh, it's a picture of a partridge. On the second day, oh, it's a picture of
Right.
2 turtle. I thought, what if you give it a narrative, and what if you read the list literally every day so that you get a partridge in a pear tree every day? And then from the second day on, you get 2 more turtle doves and 3 more French hens and so on until by the end it has escalated in a Malthusian way to just utter insanity, but a joyful insanity because there's sort of a story in there, um, which was fun to develop. I did the drawings in just a few weeks in 1990 and put together a Xerox mock-up of what the book would look like just in black and white. Started shopping it around to publishers. And in that day and age, they didn't want the unfinished work of an unknown artist.
Yeah.
I was told again and again, oh, Christmas books don't sell, or nobody wants children's books. And I knew what they were saying is that nobody wants your children's book.
Right.
Um, so I set it aside and went back to making a living. And then when TSR hired me, the contract there was that anything I worked on while I was there, even if it was personal,
Was
even if I did it at home, but it would belong to them.
Yep.
So I didn't look at it until Wizards of the Coast fired me. Wizards of the Coast didn't perpetuate that part of the contract. They actually freed us up to do freelance work and sell prints
Hmm.
and a number of things that other gaming companies weren't going to do. Um, but when they laid me off, I found the drawings and had the sense to get them all scanned and formatted in Photoshop to the proper size and cleaned up a little bit. And then I got busy again with like the Drizzt covers and work started pouring in and it took a back seat again. Right now, I don't even know where the original drawings are,
Oh wow.
but I have the scans. They got to be somewhere in this house because we were here when I scanned them. But it kind of dovetails with the working on the sequel to the novel. My publisher, DAW Books, got sold by Penguin Random House to Astra Publishing in China.
Okay.
And it was a great big upheaval. And meanwhile, I was struggling with the book, and I'd gotten nearly halfway through it and realized that I was off on the absolute wrong track, and I needed to back up and completely retool this mess. So I've been going through that. And when I finally had the first draft done and told my editor so, she said, well, I only have time to read it once, so send me the cleanest manuscript you can. It wasn't clean. The, it still had problems, and I knew it. And I was hoping my editor would help me
Edit.
out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I was relying on beta readers, and that wasn't getting me where I needed to be because there's not many knowledgeable enough or willing to say what needs to be said. And then one of them was just totally harsh and hated everything. And that was someone who loved the Summer Dragon. So I was back on my heels and not really knowing what to do. And at that point, I realized that what I needed to do was hire editors to do my editor's job to help me get over this hump.
Yeah.
And so I was waiting for any of them to be able to get started and sitting there and wondering what I was going to do with my time. And I remember the 12 days of Christmas when I got them out and saw that I had painted day one and gotten halfway through day two 20 some years ago. Um, Part of the reason I was able to even get started finishing them was because of Corel Painter, the digital paint that would let me make them look the way I want them to look, like
Yeah.
watercolor pencil drawings. That was a hurdle I couldn't jump in 1990 with traditional
Right.
media. I was
Right.
a watercolorist and I did the drawings on tracing paper. So they would have been transferred and then you always lose something. And
Yeah.
I did the first day twice, once in oils and once in acrylics. And I didn't like either one of them. But in Painter, I was able to get a first day that I liked. And I got halfway through the second day and then I got busy. But in March of 23, I picked it up and just got back to work. And that's 90% of what I did the rest of the year was I painted those 14 spreads and did the design and laid it out. And then I was showing it to some folks at MISCON last year, and one of them recommended that I contact a hybrid publisher so that this could get into stores. Don't just kickstart it, give it a shot at actually having a bigger presence. And
Yeah.
he recommended Brown Books, who are a hybrid publisher, which means that I pay for everything, but I get most of the royalties.
Yeah.
Whether that balances out in my favor at the end is hard to say. I hope it does,
Yeah.
but I ran the Kickstarter just to hopefully fund my side of that expense
Right.
and got most of the way there. It really wasn't enough to cover all the costs, but it was a big chunk.
Yeah.
So it was,
Well, you guys hit,
you know,
you hit your goal too, right? The goal that you had set.
Yeah, hit the goal, but you always set the goal lower than you really need because
Right,
otherwise it looks insurmountable and people won't
right,
jump on.
right.
Um, so yeah, you set a goal at the beginning for a publishing job, and it's frequently kind of scary because you know that if you make that number and only $1 more, you're not going to make anything on this.
Yeah,
But in this case, it was it's seed money for a bigger stake, I guess. And hopefully, it pays off in a way that we get a little Christmas bonus every year for a while.
yeah,
It would be,
yeah, definitely. And people can find that.
um,
They can pre-order that. They can go through your website,
yeah, yeah. I have a
Amazon, all
back
those
sale.
places.
Uh, Honestly, and I probably shouldn't say this for my own benefit, but you can already pre-order it on Amazon.
Hmm.
Uh, but if you want it signed, you want to get it from me.
There you
And
go.
if you go to my Kickstarter, it will send you to my backer kit page. There's a pre-order button on the Kickstarter page. It sends you to my backer kit page. So you can still buy in and you can get signatures and add-ons. Like there's a deluxe edition with thicker paper and a slipcase embossed in foil. Very, very nice. Um, I got a sample of the slipcase from the manufacturers a while back. It's going to be cool. It's going to be
That's
really
awesome.
cool. And then this is kind of the most fun. I don't know how interested most people would be in this, but in February, a month, it might even have been at the end of February. It was Easter weekend, whatever that is. I was at NorwestCon up in Seattle, and I have a friend who I've known on Facebook for years and years. Um, what I didn't realize is that he's a professional Santa. He does home visits and,
That's awesome.
shopping centers and stuff. And he was even in sort of Santa casual duds. And we'd been sitting and talking for a good hour before it struck me that I'm about to launch a Kickstarter of a Christmas book, and I'm sitting next to Santa Claus.
Yeah,
So I got him to hold up a square of paper, and we took a picture. And then when I got home, I photoshopped my cover onto it, and it looks like Santa's holding up my book. And then that got kind of a little bit of buzz on Facebook and on my sites. And then I thought, what if Santa Claus could sign your book too?
yeah,
And I mentioned that to Russell, and he said that would be great. We'll add a fee for doing it because there's logistics and he needs to be paid for his time. But um, you can buy Santa's signature, and if you do, you'll get his signature in the book along with mine. You'll also get a photo of me looking over Santa's shoulder in his shop as he's signing a copy of 12 Days of Christmas.
that's awesome.
Uh, we drove down to Oregon to visit his workshop, and he has a little studio set up with backdrops that look official. We took this photo, and I enhanced it and adjusted it, and fixed it up a little bit in Photoshop. Like the best picture of him had the worst face of me, and so I went and found a better face
You gotta do some
and
swapping.
swapped faces. I swapped faces, but so that's really cool, and that's a perk that's still available. You could get a copy of the 12 Days of Christmas
That's
by
great.
me, from me, signed by me, and signed by Santa
And
Claus
signed by Santa.
with
Can't go wrong there.
photographic proof.
Yeah, and the thing is, there's so many adults I know that get kids books, kids holiday books, for
Yeah,
themselves, not because they have kids. So,
right. And
it's
honestly,
a win-win. You get everybody included.
yeah, and this is one that adults can enjoy too, because it's zany and funny, and there's visual puns. And if you've got little kids or grandkids, it's something you can spend a great deal of time on
Yeah,
with this book open across your two laps.
that's
You can
awesome.
find all the funny stuff.
If people want to find you this summer, they can find you at Dragon Con between August 29th and September 2nd in Atlanta, Georgia,
Right.
right?
That's right. In the art show specifically, not in the dealer's hall. I don't do the dealer's hall.
Yeah, it's a little too
It's
cramped in there.
it's too crazy. It's too much of a sweat box.
Awesome.
Getting in and out is nuts. Plus, they take good care of me. The art show does. They get me a room and they give me a booth.
Nice.
I'll
Nice.
take care of my travel and my shipping and so on. All my food, I don't want to be a prima donna, but the thing that keeps me from attending shows that I would do well at, like Gen Con, is the housing situation. It's always such a such a big mess. And if you're not there right at the beginning, and I never am,
Right.
then it's the hugest hassle. It's the hardest part of doing a convention
Yeah.
is where am I going to stay? So they make it easy.
Yeah.
And I've been
That's
doing
great.
it for a decade and a half, and I have a lot of friends down there. I have a whole Southern family. You know, it's kind of cool. It's nice to know people from another part of the country well
Yeah.
and see the differences. You know, it's
That's awesome.
humanizing.
That's awesome. They can find you at toddlockwood.com.
Yep.
The Facebook, you got a couple Facebook pages: Art of Todd Lockwood, the actual art of Todd Lockwood, and the 12 Days of Christmas has its own Facebook page too. So you can type
Yep.
in the 12 Days of Christmas,
Yeah.
TWELVE, Days of Christmas, on Facebook and find that as well. We'll put that in the show notes also, so you can find all those
Yeah, when
links
you
in the
look
show
for that
notes.
on Facebook, it's the one with the drawing of the lions blowing flutes, and you're on the right 12 days
There we
page.
go.
Yeah.
Awesome,
And
awesome.
there's two fan pages because my primary page, The Art of Todd Lockwood, got stolen in February or late February, right before my Kickstarter launched. And I lost 23K followers overnight, actually within the space of a minute.
Yeah,
It happened real time. I watched it happen. It was crazy. And it was a fight getting it back. I did finally get it back. Facebook's really slow. It's kind of now in a condition where it's difficult to manage without jumping through different hoops.
yeah,
But while I was waiting for that to either happen or not happen, I started the actual art of Todd Lockwood so I would have somewhere to post the stuff that I couldn't post on my old page.
yeah.
Now I have them both, but the one gets more upkeep than the
Right.
other.
So check them both, message both, find all the information there, everybody. You can also find him on Instagram at todd.lockwood on Instagram as well. So go and check out all those things. And of course, like I said, toddlockwood.com will send you to all of those places, send you everywhere you need, and see all kinds of cool pictures and art and, you know, a whole gallery of things there as well. So
Yep, yep.
everybody listening, stick around for the live stream Q&A for those of you that are here, and those that are listening to the podcast. I want to let you guys know, coming up, we're going to be joined by James Lauder. He's written for Ravenloft, Forgotten Realms, GURPS, Hack and Slash, many, many more. Amazing author, well known in the D&D world. He's going to be joining us live July 15th. That episode will be available for download July 16th. Also coming up down the road, we're going to be joined by the one and only Dave Schrader. Yes, Dave Schrader is going to be returning, the star of the Discovery Show, Holzer Files, also the Ghost of Devil's Perch. He's also the host of the Paranormal 60. He's going to be returning to talk about his new book and his new radio show. So you definitely want to make sure to join us for that down the road as well. Dave's a great guy, does all kinds of great work, so I can't wait to talk with him again. So remember to rate, review, follow, subscribe. Make sure to get all those notifications, and make sure to do those ratings and reviews, because it does help us, and it also helps all of our guests. So make sure to go and pre-order Todd Lockwood's 12 Days of Christmas, out in October. And I want to say, for Todd, I am Nick, and thank you for listening to Epic Realms.